Amy Cameron is executive in charge of production, drama at CBC. After her first role at CBC as executive in charge of production, comedy, Cameron went on to become head of development at Verite Films, known for producing shows like Insecurity and Corner Gas. As a writer, Cameron and her sister, Tassie, were the co-creators and writers for the CBC TV series Wild Roses, and Cameron has authored a book entitled Playing with Matches, Misadventures in Dating. Before her career as an executive for a major television network, Cameron was a business and entertainment editor for Maclean's and a regular contributor to Owl Magazine, The Globe and Mail, and Chatelaine. In addition to this, she spent 4 years as the crime and Aboriginal affairs reporter for the New Brunswick Telegraph-Journal. Cameron is a graduate of the Canadian Film Centre and holds a BFA in Studio Arts from Concordia University. Today, as part of the CBC Drama team, Cameron oversees the creative content for HEARTLAND Season 8, Republic of DOYLE 6th and final season, and the 6-part miniseries Book of Negroes. She also handles the development of several one-hour drama projects. eBoss is pleased to welcome Amy Cameron to 10 Questions. So, Amy, part of what makes life so interesting is that we all have our unique journeys. And whenever we hear about someone's unique journey, it gives us ideas about what we can be doing to get to where they are. So I guess my first question for you is, can you tell us a bit about your journey and what you did and the choices that you made to get to where you are today?
Sure. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And in fact, really didn't want to go to university, so I ended up doing a fashion design program in Paris, and I was trying to do anything but become serious about life. Then went into a fine arts program at Concordia University. And after I came out of that program, which I loved visual arts, I realized I needed to pay the bills. And so I went to I moved to New Brunswick just because I thought it would be cheaper and I'd be able to somehow eke out a living as a painter. Right. And was working as a waitress and not painting, and I thought, I'm desperate to do something, and I was finding St. John, New Brunswick so interesting, all the characters I was meeting, the people I was talking to. So I thought, well, I'm going to pitch a column to the newspaper. So I walked in and I said, I think I can write, and so I'd like to try and, pitch you this idea by writing about the characters I'm meeting. And I speak French, and so they said, well, you speak French and we need a French reporter in Moncton, would you be willing to try that out? And I thought, all right. Sure. So I sort of leapt into it, not really knowing what I was doing. They gave me a month to prove myself, and I ended up staying for 4 years. And that sort of launched me into this path of telling stories. I've always loved telling stories. That was the one thing I kept trying to find my way to tell stories, and was doing it visually, and then in print media, and then it's getting really hard. In newspapers and magazines to sort of tell the kind of stories that you might want to tell. And I thought, it might be nice to tell stories that I've made up. So then I moved into screenwriting. So it's a funny thing. It's always been the sort of through line of my life has been about telling stories. But I kind of moved with different opportunities as they came up. So I had an offer to write a book. I came up with a book idea while I was working at Maclean's magazine. And so I thought, well, let's try this. So I wrote the book, and that was fun. And then I was starving and not making any money. I had a mortgage, and I thought, okay, what do I do now? And my sister is a screenwriter, and she said, why don't you go to the Canadian Film Centre and see if you enjoy doing that. That's 6 months of your life that you're committing to trying this new path. So I got in, and I went there, and on my last day at the Canadian Film Centre, I had worked very hard while I was there to develop an idea, and I pitched it to CBC, and they liked it, so I got a project into development, and I found out on my last day at school, so it was kind of cool. I was walking out of the CFC into a real screenwriting gig, which was incredibly lucky, and it was, again, just telling stories. It was wonderful to be able to have this opportunity to try and tell it in a different way, And that turned into Wild Roses, which ran for 1 year. It was a lot of fun. It was hotties on horses. It was basically the Canadian Dallas, and I enjoyed that very much. It was really wish fulfillment. It was about sort of what would it be like to be in Alberta and have this very dramatic and sort of soapy world out there. So it was fun to play in that. And then I was working at some feature films and still doing some freelance writing for different magazines.
Right.
And I got a call to come in and do an interview at CBC as an executive in the comedy department. And it was out of the blue, and it was something I'd never thought about. And I went in, and I was fairly. I think it's funny. I think that the times I've ever gotten the job when I've gone into an interview have been the times where I've sort of thought, "There's no way I'm getting this job."
Yeah.
So you walk in, I'm more relaxed, so I'm sort of more off the cuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was offered the job. I went in there and discovered this whole other new arena to play in,
Right.
and help other people tell their stories. And so it's been very, very exciting. So I've done that, and then I went into development at Verite Films, and then I'm back at CBC in drama.
That's fantastic. And, it's interesting because life is really a series of opportunities, and you have to decide whether you're going to go to that direction or the next. You're going to open that door, you're going to open the other door.
Yeah.
One of our members on our eBoss community asked a question that relates to your work when you were in the print media business. And so what are some of the challenges associated with someone who's going to actually be focused on building their career in print media?
There are a lot of challenges. The first is just having that, making that adjustment to a freelancing mindset. Trying to get a job in print media, like a full-time job with benefits in print media, is so hard these days. And I think flexibility is one of the biggest things that are required now for people working in that world, because you need to be able to write for different scenarios and in different ways, and try and keep thinking, okay, is this a digital story? How am I going to, you need to be able to sort of move through that world in a sort of fluid way and find opportunities and work really. It's hard because I think half of the job is actually finding the opportunities. If you don't have the staff gig, and I was lucky I had the staff job at Maclean's magazine, but when I left and I was freelancing, half of my time was spent finding the next job, and that's a very challenging sort of aspect of it, because you want to be writing stories, you want to be interviewing people, you want to be getting out there, but it's a relationship like the film and television business. It's a relationship business. It's all about who you know and how you get out there and meet people and start talking about ideas and pitching stories. But I don't think that I certainly wasn't aware of how much work I'd be doing trying to get the next job. I really did think I could just write the stories and find the venues, and it would all sort of fall into place. But it was a lot of work to try and sort of make sure that I knew what people wanted and I was able to deliver that.
Right. Now, stories sticks out to me. And one of our members actually asked a question about Canadian content versus American content specifically, probably because American content dominates on the global stage. So when CBC is actually conceptualizing what they're going to bring to the marketplace, do they think about what's going to actually resonate with Canadians, or do they think about what's going to resonate with a global audience? Where does CBC kind of place their headspace when they're coming up with stories to tell or content to actually produce?
Well, I think it's both.
Yeah.
We're the national broadcaster, so it's very much about Canadian content,
Right.
and we are working hard to make sure that not only are we working with established Canadian creators and talent, but that we're reaching out and trying to find the new talent, the new creators, the new voices in Canada, and that's our role as the public broadcaster. I feel. But obviously, and these are higher pay grades than mine, they're trying to figure out how to make sure that we are able to reach out to an international audience. And things like BOOK of Negroes is a great example of how that's worked. with BET coming on board, that's been a really exciting collaboration for us, and being able to tap into the sort of resources and the challenges and the interest of what's happening south of the border, and then trying to pair that with what our goals are. It's been very exciting, and I've loved that. I've loved that opportunity to look a little bit beyond our borders. Now, that's very much a Canadian story.
Right.
Lawrence Hill is ours,
Yeah.
and we are not letting him go.
No, we're
so
not.
that was sort of a no-brainer for
Right.
CBC. It was easy. It was an easy sell, and so I think that we're trying to find that balance. But
Right.
we do need to tell the homegrown stories. We do need to be sort of championing our own talent and our creators in this country. But I think that there's also an opportunity to find sort of happy marriages in the mix.
Yeah, Book of Negroes is an exciting project. Like you said, Lawrence Hill is one of our own, acclaimed, award-winning Canadian author. I know that Book of Negroes comes out January 7th, I believe, in 2015.
Yes.
So another question that came in was, what was the most rewarding aspect of doing this project? And perhaps, what was a challenge linked to doing the project?
They're sort of one and the same.
Right.
And my answer may surprise you.
Okay.
And maybe it won't. I don't know. For me, I had the experience of going to South Africa for that, which was wonderful. And I got to spend time with Lawrence Hill in South Africa, and with Clement and with Damon, who are the director and the producer on the project. And I found what was challenging and then ultimately rewarding for me personally, and this is less, I can speak to the sort of being the exec on the project
Right.
aspect of it, but personally was that opportunity to discuss race, which I think is top of mind for me a little bit right now because I have 2 young children, and there's this sense of trying to teach your children to be colorblind. And I think that's crazy because kids know. And so I wanted the opportunity to be able to actually talk to people about race and about the differences and what that was like. And to be a white executive on a project called the Book of Negroes
Right.
is a bit of an odd situation, right? It's an odd position to be in. And now I'm able to relate to the material because I'm a woman, because there's this enormous, wonderful story about a woman.
Right.
But there's a lot of challenges in trying to sort of communicate. And how do you talk about this? And we're so careful in Canada talking about it. So going to South Africa was really life-changing for me because I've become much less nervous about talking about race and about having those conversations. I'm really interested in it, and I want to see opportunities for diversity. I want to see, and I kind of cringe at the word diversity, but it's sort of a catch-all. But I just think there's a lot of conversations I've now been able to have that I was never brave enough or felt comfortable enough or knew how to navigate. And I still don't, but at least I'm a little bit more open about it and able to sort of ask the questions that I'm interested in asking. And so that personally was the most challenging and rewarding side of the project. And it was surprising for me. I really hadn't expected that. And I think on the show, as an executive on the show, it was trying to rein in such an enormous tale.
Right.
It's such an epic story, and people's reaction to the story and their experience reading the book is very personal, and they draw from that story their own sort of personal favorite moments or things that really resonated. And so when you're trying to bring that down to 6 parts, it's hard. You know, it's a challenge to try and rein in that kind of material. And Clement and Lawrence, who co-wrote one of the scripts, they really did a remarkable job in trying to make sure that they were hitting the key moments, but also allowing the sort of magic of this story to come out. But it was a challenge, and I'm excited to see how people react to it.
Well, I'm excited to see it as well.
This segment of 10 Questions has been brought to you by OMB's Jump Restaurant, located at 18 Wellington Street West in downtown Toronto. Jump combines classic style with sleek, modern eclecticism.
So this actually is appropriate to go into another question here about representing underrepresented groups on a network. So we actually had two people ask the same question but a different way. They wanted to know, what is the future for CBC in the context of bringing more stories like the Book of Negroes to the network? Any thoughts there in terms of what some of the conversations are on the ground around representing underrepresented groups?
Oh, well, it's top of mind.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is at CBC. It is a priority. It's funny. So after I came back from South Africa, and I'd had this amazing experience there because I was with all of these people who. I mean, in South Africa, you talk about race. It's
Right.
just very open, frank conversations.
Yeah.
A lot of. It was wonderful. It was great. And I came back, and one of the producers that I'm working with on a show in development is Jen Holness, and Jen is Black, and so I called her up and I said, okay, we need to have a conversation. And she said, okay, and I said, you're a Black woman,
Yeah.
and I'm a white woman,
Yeah.
and we need to talk.
Yeah.
She said, I really don't know where you're going with this. I said, I want to know what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
what can we do? What are we? And so we talked a lot about the characters in what she was developing and whether or not there were opportunities there. And that was an organic conversation because I was full of fire coming back from South Africa. But I think that that's something that is it's a topic that we're really trying to explore and find different ways of having those conversations. I think people are uncomfortable a little bit, nervous about how to talk about sort of underrepresented people in the stories, but also in the creative teams, and so we actually have a unit or a group of people at CBC who are dedicated to this very thing, and so trying to do outreach, trying to make sure that we are finding different voices from different backgrounds from across the country. It's slow.
Yeah.
It's slow. It's hard, and it's rotten that it's slow, and it's rotten that it's hard, but it is a conversation that we have a lot, and I think that it's an incredibly valuable conversation because I think we're going to start to see some really fun stories coming out of that, and some amazing work coming out of that. So I am very hopeful about it. Especially because it does seem to be one of those things. Even 3 years ago when I was at CBC, we were talking about it, but it was not really... It was there. We were talking about it. But it seems now, and maybe it's just my different perspective, and maybe it's Book of Negroes having this and as a sort of starting point for conversations.
Right.
It's really something that everybody's sort of thinking about it, and can we look at the sort of those characters and that story, and can we tweak it, and is there a way to do this, and can we talk about who we're reaching out to in terms of material coming in for development. So I'm full of hope.
And it's great too because I know in your background you've done some work with the Aboriginal population, so you're someone who actually can appreciate the broad spectrum of what diversity, we'll just use that word because we've been saying it, really looks like. So it's fantastic that these conversations are happening. So in terms of bringing an idea and trying to pitch the idea to a network, how does one actually take a script and pitch it to a network like CBC? Is there a process for that?
Well, you make a phone call.
Right, yeah.
That's pretty much it. You can call the department, and if it's a drama or a comedy, we have a submission process that's online. But there's also there are a number of executives at the CBC who work in comedy and drama, and we are out there and available and happy to have people submit to us directly. We have a development manager who's someone who sort of handles stuff as it's coming in. And our process is a great one, I think. Generally, it's nice to have somebody come in and talk to us and pitch it to us in person.
Right.
And we have usually two people in the room so that we can both ask questions, we make sure we cover our bases, and then we receive written material. After that, we'll ask for something, a pitch document, or if they have a script or whatever it is that they want to submit to us. And we circulate that among the rest of the executives, and then we all meet as a group and talk about it. We are much more accessible than I think people think we are.
Yes.
The process is online on the website, but it's also, if you just look up the names of executives, and I think we're all on there, although I don't know, but you can just email us directly and or call and track us down, and we're all really happy to meet new people and hear good stories. So.
Yeah. So what about reality TV? Does CBC have an appetite for reality TV? I believe CBC has dabbled in reality TV from time to time.
Yeah. I think we do. It's really not my department, so I don't know the official line on that, though from what I'm seeing on TV, we do. I think it boils down to good ideas, and I know that sounds sort of cheesy, but it really, like, if you've got a great idea, then we will work really hard to try and make sure that there's a place for it. So that if it's reality, then I mean, there's a whole other area of the CBC, and we tend to, the scripted and unscripted departments, we know each other and wave, but I really don't know what's going on in their department. So
right. So another member asked the question: YouTube and a couple of other websites online, they allow people who have their own ideas to produce them independently. And we've seen in the music business, for example, a lot of record labels or music executives finding artists and bands by going online and seeing who's out there and what they're doing. To generate content, does CBC ever look to see what independent projects are popping up online and whether or not it makes sense to say, let's go from independent to producing this and making it mainstream?
Definitely. More so in comedy, I think, than in drama. I know that they are actively involved in sort of meeting with and finding comedic talent that they've seen through various web series. Mm-hmm. We also have an extraordinary digital team at CBC, and they are brilliant at bringing up sort of things that they're finding. Like, not only are they great at building our brands online, they've done remarkable work with that, but they're actually sort of our secret weapon in terms of the guys who know what's going on, and women, the people who know what's going on online, and they're able to come in and talk to us and say, have you checked this out? And it's wonderful, it's great, because that's their job, but it's had an unexpected benefit in that they're able to sort of highlight some interesting writers or performers that we hadn't had our eye on beforehand. So we are very much aware of it. It does seem to be sort of something that comedy is doing a little bit more than drama at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a question that eBoss likes to ask all of their guests, and it's a question around our arts and entertainment industry in Canada, and what can we do differently, or what can we do better to bolster the industry? Are there any ideas that you have as someone who is an arts and culture practitioner about how we can grow Canada's arts and entertainment culture here? Any thoughts? I wish
I had a great answer. I wish I pulled the rabbit out of the hat.
I wish you could too.
I think, well, I believe, and this is probably also indicative of my recent experience, I believe that talking to more people is the answer. It's a business built on relationships. It's an industry that is all about sort of who you know, how you work together, what you do. But I do think that sometimes we can get into ruts. And we get into ruts with who we work with. We get into ruts with the sort of the way we work material. We don't push as often as maybe we should to try and find different ways of developing material, of finding new talent, of all that sort of stuff. And so I think, I don't know that it's the answer, but I think it's a great start because there are a lot of great ideas out there that aren't being heard, and we're an enormous country, and so sometimes I think the ideas start, they swirl around one particular area, but we don't sort of branch out beyond that. So I think it's having broader conversations, trying to find people we haven't met, we haven't talked to before, and trying to build that kind of creative flow of communication between these different people.
Fantastic. So we all have mentors, and my question now is to find out who your mentors are. Who are the people that have inspired you, that have kept you going, that have motivated you to do what you do so well? Anyone that you can share?
Well, again, a cheesy answer for you. My sister, who's a screenwriter, Tassie Cameron, she was the showrunner on Rookie Blue, and creator and showrunner on that show, and she is probably my biggest champion, so that's very nice to have somebody in the industry who thinks I'm awesome. And I would say that two women who I have worked with, who I find really, I've learned a ton from, Virginia Thompson at Verite Films, she was my boss when I was head of development there. That she is a remarkable producer. She never sleeps, and she never stops thinking about how to do things differently. And I think a great example of that is the Cornelius movie that just came out, and how she did crowdsourcing for our Kickstarter campaign to try and get that movie off the ground. And I find her ability to think out of the box inspiring. And the other person would be my current boss, Helen Asmakis. I think she's been in the industry for a long time. She's been at CBC for a long time. She has she's really good at sort of taking chances and not listening or hanging on to sort of the industry crap that can happen, right? Like, she's very good at sort of just cutting through all of that and recognizing, okay, let's talk about the material, let's talk about the skills of that person, and not listening to the swirl that can sometimes happen. And I find that really admirable. So I sort of try to model my behavior on hers.
Right.
I don't know that I do it very well, but anyway.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I have to thank you, Amy, for taking the time to answer 10 questions with eBOS Canada. You just said in the second last question that it is really important to make sure that we are communicating, making sure that we're more fluid about how we have our exchanges. And I think that you're an example of that type of person, your willingness to be here with us today. So thank you again.
Well, thank you.
For sure.
It's fun to be here.
This segment of 10 questions has been brought to you by "10 Questions" is presented by eBOS Canada.